And she is from Luovi Vocational.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here presenting these results of the survey. And I must say that I feel a little bit humble after Mikko's fine, great, and very fluent presentation. So I may have to move the stage a little bit. But anyway, this was the survey of prison education in Finland 2011. And I must say that this is a survey. It's not a research. It's not a statistical study. So you have to be very careful when you draw the conclusions. It's because we didn't have any statistical data. We did some we had questionnaires, we had interviews, and then we put up the results. But to draw very heavy conclusions, it's quite dangerous, I'd say. A little bit about the background and the working group. This assignment was given us by Ministry of Culture and Education, and that was actually in the end of 1910, and we started in the beginning of the year 1911. This task was given to the group of five special education members of five special education institutes in Finland. And Luovi, which I myself present, was a coordinator. So that's why on these PowerPoint slides I have logos of five special education institutes. We all did this together, though of course because Luovi was a coordinator, the main responsibility was I had the main responsibility and also some of my staff. But also representatives of National Board of Education and Criminal Sanctions Agency were in steering group, and we met on regular basis. Actually, here is Sanna Penttinen is there, and Tarja Koskimäki, who were both representative of National Board of Education and Minister of Education, Culture and Education, and they all were very much involved. So also were representatives of different education providers and also the prison staff. So we wanted to make this it was a very wide group that was sort of making the survey plan, and we wanted to have everyone involved so that this could be as widely spread as possible. And also we did go through former studies and surveys, which was this national research made a few years back, and then of course this Nordic prison education research that was, I believe that was 2009. And why we five vocational special education centers were chosen, I do not know that, but I think that it was partly because we all are involved in way or other in prison education, and we all have experience of students with disabilities, which most of the prisoners, of course, are. So that was and that was just 1 year's time. So that was one of the reasons that we decided, according to the assignment, that it's not going to be very, very deep research. I think the main idea was to get a big picture of how the prison education is, let's say, run at the moment, who is doing what, why is the offer as it is, and we picked up some key questions. Some of them were from the assignment, but some also were sort of they came up while we discussed with the steering group. So first of all, and then there's no, actually there's no statistics of how many prisoners there are. There was no big picture. Everyone knew someone was being organizing and providing education, but the whole picture was kind of not clear. So we wanted to find out how the prison education is actually organized and accomplished in general. And of course, because most of the prisoners are adults, we wanted to know how the personal study plans are working, how is the previous education and work experience taken into account, as it's very well done outside prison in a let's say usual education. How are the curriculums followed? If there is a education or training that is supposed to be run by the national curriculum, is that so, or is there a certain prison curriculum in prisons? That was one of the topics. And of course then, why are some institutions, some centers providing education, why others are not? What kind of education is provided? And how are the training programs practically organized, because they must be different in semi-open prisons or closed prisons. One of the key interests was also the cooperation between different parties, between the education providers, and prison staff, teachers and prison staff. How does it look like? And what topics the cooperation is accurate? And one of the main questions is of course that how is the education, is it really responding the needs of offenders? Are we education providers offering training programs that are really productive and effective? Even we really cannot, we didn't look for the measures, we just wanted to find what people think. So after all this discussion, spring, actually in the winter 2011, we decided that the topics of the survey were like these. Not quite. So on what basis the education and training is offered and organized in prisons? That's because we know that there are, we knew already that there were quite a few institutions and training centers that offered the education, and there didn't seem to be, it didn't seem to be very logical why this and why not the others. Some of the questions I already mentioned earlier as on the topic. And of course, funding the prison education, we all know that it's funded by the Ministry of Education, and there's no special fund or special money for prison education, but we wanted to know how the different education providers are handling this, because we all know that it's quite time consuming and not very easy, needs a lot of pre-work and so on. And then, of course, we wanted to have the critical aspects and subject for development. That was what could we do after that. And I must say that this survey didn't really bring anything new compared to those few surveys that have already been done. So, of course, you can think that nothing has really happened. I mean, the prison education is not developed, and maybe that's partly true. Maybe some little steps have been taken, but mostly the findings were quite similar as in before. Because we didn't think this is not a research, this is survey, so what we really wanted to hear everyone's voice is education providers, offenders and themselves, and of course prison personnel, prison staff. And that's why in this published we have lots of quotes of different parties. It's unfortunately we didn't translate it into Swedish or English. That's we didn't have time, and that was not part of the assignment. But I heard that the slides would come somewhere into the website, so maybe you get some idea of this. And so that's why we had a lot of open questions, which made it quite difficult to analyze. But on the other hand, it gave a lot of information that I think we, according to this purpose, we got a lot more information than just to have a questionnaire. The used questionnaire, but also the interviews. And especially we were interested in the voice of offenders. So what we did this inquiry for education providers. That was on April and May last year, and we sent this electronic questionnaire to almost 400 secondary education providers. The start for this survey was from the vocational education side, but in the beginning we decided that we take all the education providers except university into this. So that's why we sent the questionnaire to I'd say almost, well, I would say that to all Finnish education providers through internet. And we got 54% replies, and we were quite happy because the timing was really challenging. It was in May, April, May, and actually it was more in May than in April, so the schools were very busy. But anyway, we were quite happy. And here you can see the institutions that answered. There were liberal education institutes, 120, and then vocational education, 41, and so on. So we were quite happy with this. Of course, not all answered, and when you looked at the ones who answered and the ones who didn't, there were some big, for instance, vocational education providers that did not answer. So this is not. This is, in that way, this of course is not sort of scientifically reliable. But when you look at the open questions, the answers for the open questions, they repeated themselves very, very much. So we figured that maybe there would not have been such a big increase, or maybe that the insights would have not been different because so many answers that were the sort of same kind. Then we decided to interview the prison staff, and that was done in May and August, and we did 23 interviews altogether. And the persons, the titles we interviewed were director, assistant manager, student council, or special instructor. In some interviews there were two, in some interviews someone was alone. And of course we interviewed the development managers of 3 criminal sanction areas of Finland, and closed and open prisons. We didn't do the interviews in all prisons. We wanted to have try to have a sort of the sample. So this, but again, when you look at the answers, they are quite similar. So we were quite satisfied with the data anyway. And the person who did the interviews was one of my staff who was very experienced with prison education, had been coordinating it for years. So we chose him because he sort of knew. He didn't. He knew the language, and he knew how to put the interview. Actually, we used the same questions. So in the questionnaire interviews and also the inmates, they answered in a way almost all the same questions, and that's how I think we got sort of the different opinions from different sides, And in some questions, in some topics, that was very interesting because the opinions were quite different. So for inmates, we did by questionnaire. 500 questionnaires we sent all together, and not to all prisons again, to those prisons that we interviewed the staff, and the staff spread the questionnaires to inmates. We got back 48% of the questionnaires, and again the same idea that the answers sort of reminded themselves, and that's why we also thought that we were quite happy. We did this in Swedish and Finnish because those two languages are official in Finland, and in this point we considered this question of foreign prisoners that was already Mikko was talking about and it was talked about here. First we thought that we would translate it to some major languages but then, well, due to the assignment and time and resources, we just didn't do that. So we don't have the opinions and the answers of foreign prisoners. That's I'd say that the people who don't speak, the prisoners who don't speak Finnish, so we don't have those here, and that, of course that's another topic that should be researched sometimes. Okay, then something about the findings. From those education providers that replied, 80% are not providing education in prisons. So there were only 15%, that's 31 education providers. And you cannot be sure that are those who didn't reply are also the ones that do not organize education in prison, but I would think so that they are. So there only 31 providers, and most of them are vocational training education colleges, and then senior secondary school for adults 8. No Swedish providers actually at all. So, and then we asked about the supply of education, what is offered most, and of course it seemed to be vocational education and training. Different programs, different what's called, I don't know, basic education, intermediate and high school studies, and then this preparatory training, either for vocational education or for training for students with special needs. And what was not offered almost at all was the special training program for immigrants, and then training in literacy and writing skills. It was interesting to look at the supply education in different areas, because that was very different. As there should be someone from prison staff to explain these areas, but there are three areas, central areas in Finland, and the South Finland area is small, but it's very densely populated, and there are lots of prisons and prisoners. And then there is this West Finland part, and the big one is East and North Finland, which is almost, well, when you look at the map, I think it's almost 2/3 of Finland. So in southern Finland area, there is liberal arts education and very little of vocational education, and quite a lot of preparatory training for students with special needs. And this made it so because most of the education providers, institutes who provide education for disabled persons, they are operating in this area. West Finland had least amount of education in generally, and what they had was the basic education. And then this big area, East and North Finland, they had largest offer in generally, and quite a bit of preparatory training for vocational studies and also for students with special needs. And that's quite interesting because, of course, there's big, huge distances between the education providers and the prisons, so that doesn't seem to hinder those education providers. Then we come to this offer. Why we wanted to know why the education providers offer this or that education program. What's behind there? And prison education providers and prison staff had, in one way, they had the same kind of view, but it also differed. And education providers say that it's the prison seems to be the active part in any almost all the answers. Prison has contacted and they have asked arrange the programs. But then what was interesting was that this sort of a tradition seemed to be the basis for organizing education. Over 70% of the education providers said that it's the sort of a mutual agreement that has been made long ago, and so we do it because we've been doing it for long ago. So this was very clear. What came up into my mind was that maybe it's actually not very well, or at least not very deeply analyzed why we're doing this, because this is the way we do, and of course in the training center or education center, when you start doing something, then you have a teacher there, and so it goes on. Maybe without not such a deep analysis. Prison staff said that this prison plan for term of punishment determines the choice. So what is in this plan that sort of it's the factor that determines. And machines and devices, the prison determine the choice. So the working activities, what's the work that can be done? So it's the determining factor. And also the prison staff is working as an instructor or counselor for the program. So it's sort of the prison driven factors that are determined. It was interesting to find out that the education providers didn't mention as a reason the usefulness of the training or education for the prisoners after the release. That was not mentioned for once, but it was 27% of the prison staff thought that's one of the main reasons, and that's also interesting because at least the vocational education providers, we are always really, we just want to offer the programs that are really useful and that help people to get employed. So this same mechanism doesn't, at least very clearly, seem to work with prison education, and that was quite interesting. And then for those who answered and do not offer, don't have offer in prison, so we wanted to have their answers too. We wanted to know why they are not offering. So the main reason for the respondents was that there is no prison nearby. And that was, so it seemed to be that if there is no prison nearby, it's no way to organize the prison education. Then there is not enough information about the needs and possibilities. So sort of, like I said before, it seemed that the prison is very active in contacting the education provider, so there seemed to be a lack of knowledge and lack of information about the needs. Some of them said it's not an accurate issue, hasn't thought about it at all. It's not interest. at all. And then, of course, there are fields of education that is not possible. Small school, teachers don't have special knowledge. And then it seems that the market is quite divided. If someone is already there, someone is organizing the education, so let them do it. It's their business, so they don't really, it's not accurate for the others. This not enough information about the needs and possibilities, that's one of the main themes during this survey. It seems to be that the education providers do not very well know what's needed and what could be done. The inmates do not know what could be studied, and maybe also the prison staff is a little bit confused that what really could be done. So there should be, well, one of the conclusions is, of course, that there should be much more information delivered and much more discussion. Then we wanted to know that do education providers work together, which would be very, well, you would imagine that it would help to organize the education, because it's all know that the lack of resources and it's time consuming and there are so many different questions. But over half of those who provide education said that they don't cooperate at all, so they just do it on their own. And if they do cooperate, it's sort of a technical cooperation. They maybe use the same teacher, they maybe purchase a training module from someone else, they maybe purchase a qualification proof or so. But sort of sitting down and planning together doesn't seem to be common. But I think that this is not just because of the prison education. Even at least the vocational education providers have not been doing a lot planning together until now. In a few years back, it's started to change. So this is not so surprising as it may sound, because it hasn't been very common earlier. I myself come from the city of Luovi, which is about 600 kilometers from Helsinki, big city, lots of education providers, and I've been working there for 30 years, and only I think now in maybe I'd say 3-4 years we have had discussion together about what should we do, who should, well, we don't discuss that I do offering this, okay, I don't do it because we are competitive, but we're discussing some other questions quite a bit together. So it's taken many years to come this far, so it's not surprised me that in prison education there is not that much discussion. Then we wanted to ask about the cooperation between teachers and prison staff. How do they work in everyday life when teachers are in prison teaching? Prison staff felt that they do cooperate in the matters of content training programs, student selection, mapping working environment for learning, discussing about feedback and general follow-up. Well, the teacher's point of view was a little different. They felt that it's mostly the practical matters that are discussed, practical arrangement, where shall the lessons be held, and who will be where, when, about these kind of things. So not really about the contents of the programs. And student selection, prison staff felt that it's done together, but according to the teachers or education providers, actually it was quite surprising sometimes how the students just come to the group. They just are appointed there, and so there's no background information. And after that, the finding of how the students need was done together, but before the selection process was quite one-sided. Anyway, there seemed to be, well, of course there has to be cooperation, but the way it's viewed and how deep is it and then what are the methods, that's different. And it's of course it's very obvious, both sides agreed very much what are the challenges of the cooperation, and of course the security issues were brought up very frequently. And in a way that it's the security, that's why it can't be done. Especially the education providers say that sometimes they don't really they don't get information what's behind the security rules, or well, they understand that security is the most important thing, but sometimes between the lines you could read that it's sort of an excuse, it's the security reason. But anyway, both sides were agreed on this. And then very much was brought up this question of two different cultures. In some ways it seems that it's as far as east is from land, and it's hard to combine the views because the functions of the two institutions are very different. And of course the education and training is one activity inside the prison, and the prison has lots of other activities and lots of it's functioning in totally different ways. So it's to come outside to inside. It's sometimes very hard to combine. Funding issues they were raised up all the time, and just because it's very time consuming, it needs a lot of discussion, lots of arrangements. It's not only the teaching that's time consuming, it's everything else that's there is that has to be cleared before you can start the lesson. And that needs, of course, when you think of teachers and how teachers they are, well, at least in vocational education, when they are paid by the lesson, so everything else has to be sort of fit into this. So it's very hard. And supply of real effective and productive training, and I think this is due to this fact that the education offered in prison is very traditional. So maybe both sides were sort of thinking that is this really something that's useful and have results. Of course, we don't have any measures, but anyway, that was the basic feeling. When asked about to whom in prisons the education supply is best, the prison staff said that it's for men and for young people, and surprisingly for those who need special support. And I think for men that's very obvious because there's a lot of mechanical working activities and lots of sort of men-like work done in prisons. So that's very obvious. The special support, that must be somehow due to this amount of preparatory training for disabled persons that's run very, very greatly in the prisons. First supply is for women, because at least in the prisons that there are just a few women, and then immigrants and Swedish-speaking offenders, because there was no Swedish-speaking offer, at least according to this survey. In Finland, in adult education, this personal study plan is very it's very accurate. It involves the validation of prior learning, and so that the training program can be planned as well as possible for the needs of the student. And this is found very difficult in prisons, according to education providers, because there's hardly no documents in generally, and then when it's pretty much done through the documents and through discussions, and inmates do not really recall very well the prior working history, their prior working history, and they may have very unrealistic picture or view of their own skills and studying skills, and very unrealistic picture of the demand of the working life and the job they would like to do, and of course this time question again, and how an inmate becomes a student if he comes or she comes just like that into the group, so there's really not much time to adjust and do this personal study plan. So I think this is one of the big questions that should be considered, because I'm talking now about adult vocational education, but I think it counts for other education also, that outside prison, it's the most important part, well, not most important, but very important part of the study program, and now it seems that there are so many restrictions and so many hinders that can't be done in prison. So that leaves inmates a little bit into the, they take what they are offered in a situation. Of course, then the plan for term for punishment and personal study plan, they cannot be very easy to combine. And it was amazing how many those who answered, they didn't know the term for punishment. They didn't know that there is a thing like that, which is of course quite amazing. But anyway, they don't really know what's in there, and is this training or education for prisoners, is it really in it or not? So they don't really discuss about it. Then the length of sentence determines duration of education. This is a fact because of the funding issue. I know this myself so well that if there is a prisoner who wants to study something, the length of the sentence is the first thing to look at. If the sentence is very short, it's just there's really not very many possibilities. So at least if you are talking about the vocational training, so this is it shouldn't be like this, but it is the fact that it is. And there's always this effort to try to complete the studies during the prison time, and it's very challenging. If you have 1 year and you start a vocational training for some qualification, it's if you don't have prior knowledge of the field or working experience or anything, it's just not possible. And then when the inmate is released, and of course it's always tried to arrange that he or she can continue the studies after the release, but it's, as you all know, it's not so easy. So it's the results are not they're not very good, and I know that the teachers don't feel very comfortable with this because they already know that this time is too short, and because this would need more maybe more practice, so he's not ready to take the proof and so on. So this is very stressing situation for the teachers also. And again, these two administrative sectors and which have different rules and regulations, and it's hard to combine. Okay, then about the inmate's voice, and we asked what do they think themselves that what are their possibilities to have training and education, and about half of the respondents, which were 200 whatever was it, 250, let's say that, they said that it's about they're good or at least moderate. And it's very much due to how active and motivated you yourself are. If you're active, if you're motivated, you get what you get the information and you have the chances. And of course, if there in the prison is a situation so that you can continue the prior studies, that's always a good thing. And transition to open prisons gives better opportunities. By the way, 80% of these inmates were in closed prisons, so that's why this has come up so clearly. I don't remember how many mentioned could study counselor in prison. I was a little bit amazed that it was not mentioned more, but anyway, it must have been quite a few times because it sort of popped up and we picked it up in this in the conclusion. This is, of course, a great thing that by counseling and instructing, you really can have results. And then this thing that no possibilities really, supply is very limited in prisons. And the interesting field of education is not possible for the offenders. I didn't make a slide about the background of these inmates, but over 90% of them said themselves that they have had the basic education, at least most of it. So there were only like maybe 10% that didn't have it. And 60% have had some vocational studies, but almost, 30% of them just had dropped out. So this was the background, and the technical studies and technical fields were most background for the most of these most of the persons who answered. Interesting field of education is not possible for the offenders. I think there were several open answers that suggested wish to study social or health sector, and of course, according to the quite new legislation, it's not maybe impossible, but at least it's very hard to find a job afterwards. What they want to study is ICT skills. That was very, very much brought up, and very good. The way they put it was that you cannot live in a modern society if you do not have ICT skills. And then, of course, the coping in everyday life. That was very. That was like cookery, taking care of finances, cleaning. Taking care of your own clothes, very, very modest things, language skills and basic studies. Vocational study wishes were very masculine, maybe because the answers were most of the people who answered were men. And many had previous studies in this field, building and construction, machinery, metalworks, real estate maintenance. But then this healthcare and social work, and we asked about what kind of work they would like to do afterwards, and this differs so much with their past experience or the wish to study vocational areas. One third was sort of thinking that they find their future job in this vocational area they already had, or they are studying in the prison. But 2/3 thought very, very differently. They wanted to have a job which is sort of, in one way or another, independent. Some of them even mentioned to be an entrepreneur, and sort of creative jobs, craftsmen, doing crafts, arts. And many of them wanted to do something, wanted to have a job that has something to do with helping other people, helping young people with their drug problems and the mental problems. And that's quite surprising because the wishes are very, very different from what's actually possible for them. And so I was just thinking after listening to Mikko about this. I don't know what brought it into my mind, but I think this is something that should also be considered if they study something and they don't see it very important, or they don't see it as a way to get a job in the future. So, and then they have dreams that are way ahead what they can do. So this does not help them to be part of the society after the release. Of course, the wishes and the ideas to what kind of job they would like. They would like a nice job and a lot of money, easy money, everything goes. It's the work that's and nice fellows to work with, things like that. And when you think that most of the answer, the persons who answered, they were from age 26 to 35, and then again from 35 to 45. So they were quite adults, and they still express their future working ideas like this. So it also gives some kind of a message. Well, if they do not study, so what are the main reasons for not studying that? And of course, the no suitable education supply in prison. So that's if the offer is that what the education provider has to offer, and what are the working possibilities in the prison. So that may be quite limited. And then very many reasons were behind the reasons were short sentence, and plan for the prison time is unfinished. So they don't really do anything before it's finished. And so these are and then a lot of people were on pension, and those who were on pension, they maybe thought that it's no use studying because I can't anyway work anymore. No use to study, no information available. Again, that there's no information available. I think this is something that we should pay attention to. Learning difficulties. We asked about if the learning difficulties have been, how do you say it, not clear, but tested, and 80% of the respondents said that none whatsoever tests have been made. So they maybe themselves recognize that they have learning difficulties, but then they don't really know what to do with that. I was thinking of the story that this who opened this conference told about this man who couldn't read. So maybe there are lots of those people in the prisons. So what gives the motivation to study? And this is also an interesting thing, that just to do something during the imprisonment time, it's the most important factor. Almost 100%, and those who answered said that that's the motivation. So the studying is considered reasonable and useful, in spite of what the aim is. Just to study itself is reasonable. And then to learn new skills and to be able to control one's own life better. About half were thinking about after the release, it could maybe get a better job. And then the less important motivation factors were the encouragement of the staff or the relatives. So it seems that the motivation is, at least to me, that it's something that's inside. You cannot really motivate a person. But on the other hand, a good counselor can give you a sort of a kick to start something new. So, to interpret the results is not really, it's not easy, and it should be very, very carefully done, but some ideas anyway. Both education providers and prison staff agreed that the most important thing for the teacher in prison is ability to encounter different people. And this was very clearly stated, and to recognize the different needs of different learners and learning difficulties. The life experience was very highly valued. So it seemed that both education providers and prison staff thought that it's not anyone can be a prison teacher. You can be highly qualified, but if you don't have the personality or attitude or behavioral skills, then you just aren't good. And I think all of us who work with the prison education think it's very important, the personality. Well, then we come to the critical issues that education providers brought up, and of course this funding was the number one. Security issues, how to deal with them, timing and suitability of education in generally, and of course prison as a learning environment. Now that the learning outside prison is so much brought to the working places, and the ICT has been used greatly, so there was a lot of suspicion, a lot of thinking that inside the prison the learning environment is not so great. Prison staff thought that security, of course, was important. Practical arrangements, I think this is something to do with the everyday life in prison, and sometimes in the answers you could read that education and training, arranging education and training possibilities it's very complicated, and maybe sometimes the staff feels that it's sort of extra, they have to bother to do it. Informing teachers how to work in prison, this is something to do with the cultural things also. And interesting thing is that the prison staff brought up one of the critical issues, the challenging learners, but the education providers didn't bring it up, so maybe it's, I don't know what it tells about. And then the critical issues for the inmates, they think that, of course, the very narrow selection of studies, smaller amount of proper vocational training, and no entry into bed. That can be very understandable. And all kinds of restrictions and permissions that are needed, especially if you want to study outside the prison or self-studies. I guess that's what they. And what should be done for the development is, of course, this use of internet and e-learning possibilities. Then very firmly, everyone was saying better coordination, clear roles and tasks for both parties. And this increasing cooperation, increasing possibility to participate in training outside, flexibility, combining working and learning activities. And there was this wish for special funding for prison education. And as a sort of a conclusion, education providers were wishing for the coordination and gathering and supplying information, so that those who do not provide at the moment, they could get it from somewhere, I don't know where. And definition of the roles and training and education and the normal activities in prison. So sort of the bigger picture and is very much needed. I think it's very important to think carefully what kind of education is needed, of course, so that the inmates could integrate into the society after the release. Also, us education providers should think this much more efficiently. And then when I think of the adult education sector in Finland, there's so much has been done. This advice and counseling services have been developed, personal study plan has been developed through various EU programs, and also the transition from school to work. There are several ways to make it more efficient, job coaching services, things like that. And none of these at the moment are very much, I believe, very much run in the prisons. So the question is that how could we all together make sure that the inmates are not left behind, so that the education in prison is just offering something. Of course, I'm not saying that those, including us ourselves, who offer training in prisons, are doing it as well as we can. But still, there is, compared to the education outside, there's so much more that should be done, and this needs, well, maybe even ministries talking together and really sort of finding ways to improve the situation. Thank you so much for listening.